So a couple other things you're going to want to know about this project is I am doing this water pump replacement on my wife's SUV, which is a 2013 Lexus GX460. So if you have that vehicle, it's obviously the same. However, that vehicle, the one I'm going to be working on, has got the Toyota 1UR FE engine in it. And that particular engine is used in a few other vehicles. So in addition to my wife's car, it's used on all GX460s from 2009 to now, which is 2020. It's also used on Toyota Sequoias from 2009 to 2012, and it's also used on Toyota Tundras from 2009 to now, which is 2020. So if you have one of those other vehicles, the procedure might be slightly different, but it's going to be really close to the same, if not almost identical. So let's talk about prices for a minute. I always say don't do something yourself if it's actually cheaper to pay somebody else to do it, right? That's usually how I operate, but I also like working on cars, so sometimes I'll do a project myself, kind of just for fun. I know that sounds crazy. So let's first talk about just hiring the dealer to do this job. I did call my local Lexus dealer, and they rough quoted me $1,000 to do the water pump replacement. Now I have a feeling that's without tax, and I have a feeling it was going to grow up from there, but that's what they said. They said about $1,000. I didn't really get to go into what all was going to get replaced, so my guess is that's water pump only. The truth is, if you're changing the water pump, you should also change the thermostat and the belt. The reason why is because you have to take the thermostat off anyway to take the water pump off, and you have to take the belt off anyway. So when you have those parts off, if they're not new, you should put them on new. So $1,000 if you went to the dealer. I have a feeling it'd be plus tax plus more. So my guess would be more in the range of $1,500. So let's just talk about parts though. So from a parts point of view, water pump from the dealer, $234, from Amazon, $76, same part. Thermostat, $72 from the dealer, $40 from Amazon. On the belt, $120 from the dealer. I know it's crazy. And $34 from Amazon. I didn't price the antifreeze from the dealer, but a gallon bottle of antifreeze concentrate, which makes 2 gallons of mixed antifreeze, is $34 from Amazon. So we're looking at a total, if you buy your parts from Amazon, of $184, or if you buy your parts from Lexus, $460. So that's a quick rundown of what the price on this project is for the parts. Hey guys, something I wanted to show you on here on my computer before I get into the actual water pump replacement job on that car is I wanted to show you Toyota information system, or Toyota technical information systems. Really good service. Since I'm going to be working on a Lexus, I went on here to get the data. This is kind of like having a repair manual, if you will. In this particular case though, you don't buy the repair manual, you subscribe to it. And what I usually do, if I'm doing a job that I really can't figure it out, or I really want the technical information from the factory, I'll buy this 2-day subscription here for 20 bucks. I remember it used to be $15 a few years ago, but it looks like they're doing 20. So I bought a subscription to that. Good service. I highly recommend it if you got a Toyota, Lexus, or Scion, because all 3 of those brands are Toyota, and you can get their information on here. Once you have it, you go to this website, techinfo.toyota.com. You hit log in. And it'll bring you to a page like this. You can click on this tab up here where it says TIS. And then you can pick your vehicle out that you're working on. In my case, it's a Lexus GX460 2013. And I'm going to search for a water pump. And what you get is, service bulletins, different things. Under the repair manual category is where I always go. Opens up another window that you navigate around, and this is what it looks like. So the key thing about this is it's a tricky kind of navigation type interface. So you can see there's a table of contents where I'm in engine, water pump, or engine, cooling, water pump, removal. And then here's the procedure for the water pump removal. But here's the catch. They don't repeat any information. So if two particular procedures involve a particular, removal of something, they don't repeat it. They link it everywhere. So like in this case, this looks like this is the whole procedure. 9 steps, looks pretty straightforward for removing the water pump. Well, it's not, because on this remove water inlet subassembly with thermostat, you go hit this link, which takes you here. And then look, there's a whole bunch of steps just to do that. And a bunch of these steps. Remove upper radiator support seal. It's got a link where it takes you to a step somewhere else on the engine assembly, where it shows you how to actually do it. And then you can hit, they give you a back button here where you can navigate around in this thing. Honestly, it's kind of neat. I can see where if you're a technician working at a dealership doing this all the time and you have a terminal right there at your workstation and you can navigate this and follow it around, it's great. For someone like me who just wants one procedure in every step, it's not that great. The other thing is you only have access to it however long you subscribe. So, and I subscribed for 2 days just to get what I wanted. You can print stuff off of here. That way you have a copy. Or print it to PDF or whatever. The only issue is there's so many links and there's so many stuff linked together, it can be really difficult. And like I showed you a minute ago, you follow this link and then this link. This actually took you to step 15. And all that's really relevant on this page is this right here. And this is a giant procedure on how to take the whole freaking engine apart. So, very good, very detailed information. However, it's not ideal for a DIYer like me. So here's what I did. While I had my subscription active, I went through and I did a lot of copy and pasting. I did a lot of screenshots to get the images and created this document. So this is a water pump replacement procedure, the way it should be written for someone like me. I did this mainly just to make sure I had all the information. There is a ton of detail in this. I spent some time creating this document. There's every torque value. There's even how to locate the clips, the clamps that are on the radiator hoses. It's very detailed. I created this document so I'd have a record once my subscription was expired, because I can't get to do the procedure during the subscription period. But anyway, this is kind of my own document. And I'm going to put a link to this in my description so you can use it too if you want. And as I go through the procedure while I'm doing this water pump replacement on my wife's SUV, I'll refer to the different steps on here. I'm going to use this as a reference. I might find that I don't have to do some of these steps. We'll see how it goes. Okay, to start with, I've got the car jacked up. So you can just pry these up with a screwdriver, like so. In my case, most of them are broken, so they're going to have to be replaced when I redo the car. The way these things work, so they actually start like this. You push them down in there, and then you press this thing down, and it causes it to expand. So if you have one of these that is actually locked in, you're going to want to get a screwdriver up underneath the edge and pull that up. In my case, I tried a few of them, and they're all just old and broken, and I'm going to have to replace all these. Okay, this engine cover we'll need to take off to get more access down there. It is just snapped on, so we just pull up on it. And just hooks in the back. These hooks right here go into the rod back there. Underneath the car, there are 2 panels you have to remove. This front plastic one that I'm touching right here, and then this large metal one. You take both of these off also when you do an oil change. So I've done this many times, and I always use a driver to do this. Okay, for the metal part, it is a 12 millimeter, and there are 4 bolts. Okay, this thing will hinge down like you see here on a couple of little pins, and then you can pull it out like so, and what you see is there's a couple little hinge pins here that go into these slots. Okay, this is down underneath the car on the passenger side, and that little white thing right there is the right here is the radiator drain. So I've put a bucket right here underneath it, and we're going to loosen this. While that's draining, we'll just we'll take the radiator cap off here. That'll help that drain. Okay, it looks like this thing is stopped draining, just down to a drip, so we'll shut this valve back. Okay, next is going to be this radiator hose right here on the top of the engine. Let's see here. The next step is going to be to remove this fan, and it is bolted onto this pulley with 4 bolts. And one of the challenges here is you have to be able to remove those 4 bolts, yet that pulley there can rotate, so that can be a little tricky. So this is a little trick, I mean, that you can use. It's just to get some more leverage. My dad taught me that a long time ago. It's a little bit of a hack, but it works. So as you can see, the fan is loose now from the pulley, but we're going to leave it there just for the moment because we're going to take the shroud out at the same time. Okay, next we're going to remove this fan shroud. There's 2 bolts. One is right here, and one is over on the other side. Okay, this is 10 millimeter. And then the other bolt on the passenger side is right here. Okay, it looks like there is a 3rd bolt. I didn't notice until I started to get it loose, but you can see there's a bolt right here that goes through the overflow tank. That'll have to come out too. this tube will have to be loosened. Okay, next step is to take the belt off, and this pulley right here is the tensioner. So you get a 14mm socket to go on the end of that. So I got my ratchet attached to the belt tensioner, and I want to show you something. There's a hole in there. Okay, you can see it right there. So if you watch, you see how that moves over? And see how that thing lines up with that hole? The idea is you can stick a rod in there, and then it will hold the tensioner in this position. I would have known that except for I saw it in the instruction manual, so it's kind of a neat feature. Okay, now that tensioner is locked back with that pin, which I used an Allen wrench for that, you can just take the belt off. Real quick before I move on, this is with the belt off. So this is the actual water pump pulley right here. And what I wanted to show you was the clue that I had. And the clue is that right underneath here, see all this kind of pink crusty stuff? That is where, you see it's running down there. That is where antifreeze is leaking out of the water pump weep hole. So that's how I knew the water pump was bad. So this is the water pump, and the next step is to take out these 4 bolts to get the water pump pulley off, and you can see it will freely spin, so we're going to have to hold it with something and then break those bolts loose. So a couple things I wanted to show you. One, something that I do is this. Like, this is where we took that that fan off earlier. I just put the nuts back on there loose. That's a good way to not lose them. And like the bolts for the fan shroud, I just put in here loose. This is just something that I do that is a little way to keep from losing them. So we're stuck here. So this is a common problem when you got to take a pulley off like this. So I put a wrench on this one to use it to hold the pulley still while I loosened those 3. But then the question is, how do you get that one loose? And the service manual shows using a special tool. And what I've done is I've just kind of fabricated a tool to use. In fact, I've got this one right here. This is just a steel bar, and that is cut out to do this exact same thing on a BMW I did many years ago, and I just threw this in my toolbox so I still had it. And you can see this is definitely too far apart for this one. Wonder if I can run one of these bolts in though and crank it and this thing still work. That's worth a try before I go making a whole new one. So the spacing on these two holes on this tool that I made a long time ago is wrong, but I'm thinking it might work if I just run one end. So these holes are too small. These must have been smaller bolts that I was working on before. So I'm just going to drill that out bigger. Hopefully I can just reuse this tool. I'm thinking that because there's a center protrusion sticking out, if I just tighten this one all the way down, this would still hold it still. So with the pulley removed, you get a pretty good view of the water pump itself here. There are multiple bolts around the outside. Right in here is the thermostat, which I'm planning on also replacing. And I guess I understand now why they say to do it in the order that they do, because some of the bolts that hold this housing on actually go through the water pump housing, so you really cannot remove the water pump without removing this thing first. The manual says to disconnect the other two ends of that. I think that's why they're telling you to remove this, because to get the other end of that, you'll have to move this, but I can just push this out of the way. I think that'll work for what I'm doing, so let's put it up here for the moment. Okay, this thermostat housing has got 3 nuts on it. You can see 2 here, and the other. Okay, so this, again, like I said, this housing has to come off. By the way, I put this bolt back in just so I wouldn't lose it, and I put these nuts back on here so I wouldn't lose them. So I'm just going to pop these hose clamps loose. I'm starting to see why they tell you to take this off, because to get this hose loose with this thing in the way, this whole deal in the way, is kind of a pain in the butt. All right, that was quite a bit of work, but I think all the hoses are off of this manifold here, which is a lot of them. So I guess next step is to remove this manifold. All right, so that's where that housing was located that I just took off, and right there is the water pump. So you can see those 2 bolts that held the housing on also went through the water pump. So so you see how this base bolts onto the water pump, so that's why it has to come off. Okay, so I went ahead and broke all the bolts loose. Note that they were all 12 millimeters except for 2 at the top were 14 millimeters, and I pulled this out, and a bunch of coolant drained out underneath it. So now it's just a point of finishing taking the screws out and pulling her out. Alright, so there's our water pump. And this gasket plate. Water pump removed. That's what the opening looks like where it was mounted. So just need to get down there and clean that surface up really good before we install the new one. Okay, I did this just for my own benefit. I just made a little sketch of what the water pump looked like, numbered all the bolts because there's a couple different lengths and some different diameters, so that might be a good idea to do that. And again, this is that casting. This gets reused. You don't replace this. This right here bolted onto the water pump here, and then the thermostat, plastic thermostat housing bolted on here, and those hoses hooked on here. So we're going to reuse this piece. This is the old water pump, and that's the gasket piece that was underneath it. That's the old part. This is the new one. Again, I ordered this from Amazon, did not get it from a dealer, and I'll just point out that it is virtually identical. In fact, if you look right here, you'll see that this water pump says Toyota and ASIN. I guess that's how you say that, AISIN. And when you look at the new one, it says something scratched out and ASIN. So obviously it said Toyota here, and they removed it for whatever branding reasons. So no harm at all buying the ASIN water pump. It's the exact same thing. It comes with the new plate here with the gaskets and the little O-ring, which goes right here for when you mount that housing. And then on the thermostat, this is the one I took out of the car. This is the new one. Again, bought from Amazon, but comes in a Toyota package. If you take a look at the old one, it says Toyota right there. The other important thing you want to look at on these, and it's very small right there, it says 82 degrees C. That's the temperature that this thing opens at. And the new one, again, Toyota molded right in there, and 82 degrees C. So really, no need to go to the dealer for these parts. You're going to get OEM if you just shop carefully. I also bought a jug of this. This is the pink antifreeze for Lexus Toyota Scion. I only got a gallon. This is not diluted, so it'll turn into 2 gallons once I dilute it with distilled water. And since I'm not doing a complete refill, that'll be enough. I'm not planning on flushing and doing all that. Okay, so the belt I got was a Gates brand that I ordered from Amazon. This is it. This is the old one right here. So you can see that the thickness is identical. The number of grooves in it, put them side by side, is the same. Something else I do want to show you down here on the front of the motor. I went through and cleaned all the little loose pieces of that gasket material off of the surface. Really good. I used a plastic scraping tool so it wouldn't gouge the surface. What you're going to want to do is just kind of run your finger over all of it and make sure there's a nice smooth surface. If you find any gouges or anything like that, you're going to want to clean those up a little bit. Mine was in pretty good shape and the gasket material came off pretty easy. I also took a little toothbrush and a little brush and cleaned up all that pink crusty antifreeze that came out when the water pump was weeping out of its sweep hole, just because if it starts doing that again, I want to know it. So that's why I want to do that. Also, and if I sold the car and somebody looked in there and saw that stuff, they would think the water pump was bad. Okay, on thermostats and cooling systems on cars, whenever I replace a thermostat, I always put it in water and I heat the water up and make sure the thermostat opens. You don't have to do that, but it's a good measure to do. One time that I didn't do that, the thermostat didn't open and couldn't get the car warmed up right. Took it apart, put it in the thing that had to tear it back down. This was on a BMW a long time ago. I had to tear it back down, put it in the thing, heat it up, then it opened. So it's almost like that first opening that you do in the hot water. kind of breaks it free and gets it working, because then I took that same thermostat, put it back in the car, and it worked great. So now, just to be safe, because I don't want to have to tear everything apart again, I always put them in water and heat them first and let them open and then let them close back. Here's the thermostat. We're just going to test it. You can see it's closed now because it's at room temperature. And if you look inside there, you see that the little opening is completely shut. And what'll happen when this thing gets hot is that little disc down there will lift up and will open up, and coolant will be able to flow through there. So all we're going to do is put this in some water, heat it up, and make sure it opens. Usually you can just drop the whole thermostat down in there. In this particular case, because this one has this plastic housing, I really don't want it setting on that hot surface on the bottom. So I'm going to try doing this different than I've done it before. I'm just going to set this down in there when it gets up to temperature and see if it opens that way. Okay, shooting my sensor right at the wall of the pot here. It's showing, if I can hold it still, 80 or 90 degrees C. So that should be hot enough. So we'll just drop this down in here for a few minutes. So there it is. You can see that disc down in there. You see how that's moved down, and there's a crack and you can see through. That shows that it has opened, which is what you want. So and like I said, I did this one a little different because I didn't want this plastic piece to get too hot. So I just held it down in the hot water, and it looks like it's starting to boil, so that would put us at 100 degrees C, which is a little over its temperature, but you can see even right before it got to boiling, it opened up. So it looks like this thermostat is good to go. So I just realized this this hose right here I'd pulled loose, and I really didn't even need to. So that's something I did before and thought I needed to, but it looks like I don't. So how I'm going to do this is I've just put in 2 bolts here and here, and I'll just get those started by hand. Okay, so here we are with our 8 bolts for the water pump all started. You notice those 3 aren't in there. Those are the 3 that come with that thermostat housing we'll put on next. So these 8 bolts are started, so we'll torque those down. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in 3 of the bolts, and then we're going to put that tool that I made on the 4th one so we can lock those down. Okay, so we're going to use this tool again, and you know what, since I'm going to be turning it in the opposite direction now to tighten them, I did have to drill out this other hole, so I made that mod on this tool. So we're actually going to use the other hole because as we go to tighten the other two bolts, we'll put one bolt in here, two in the other. We'll be able to tighten the other two. Then we'll be able to take these out. Okay, that was a little tricky. The tool I made really was great for breaking these loose, but not that great for torquing them. So I was able to torque 3 of them with the tool, holding one still. The last one, I had to hold one of the other bolts. I ran into a few situations where I would loosen the other one. So what I did is I tightened one a little over the torque, so I could use it to tighten the other one to the torque. So one of those 4 is tightened a little tighter than the specified torque. So next up is to install this housing back. This is where the plastic thermostat housing goes. This is the surface that goes up against the water pump. Okay, when you put this part in, you want to make sure both of these surfaces, this is the thermostat mounting surface, you want to wipe it down really good. And this surface that mounts to the water pump, you want to wipe it down really good. That O-ring holds itself in place, but you want to be sure to get this up against it, hold it in place, and then get your bolts threaded all the way in so that O-ring doesn't move. Okay, reattach this hose right here. There's 3 hoses to attach on the side of this water inlet housing. This one right here I took completely off. It goes right there. And then this one goes to the bottom. Okay, next we're gonna, right here, we're gonna put that plastic thermostat housing on. Again, threading the screws back in everywhere is a good way to make sure you know which ones go where. Okay, so before we put the fan on, we're going to go ahead and put the belt in position. Go ahead and get that belt routed in here. Okay, once we have the belt lined up on all the pulleys, we can take out that pin, let the tension onto them. So this is underneath the car. This was the radiator drain valve, and you just want to be sure that these hooks, see how there's a plastic hook there? This is the fan shroud we just put in. Make sure that hook goes into that, just like that. Here's the one on the passenger side, so you just want to be sure that hook engages like that. Okay, we can reattach this little overflow tube here. That was easy enough. And then we need to reattach this radiator hose. Okay, I got the engine going. I filled up the coolant and bled the coolant by squeezing that top radiator hose. So filled it up there at the radiator cap, and also filled it up here. In here in the car, the temperature needle is moving up like you would expect. I have the heat on high, and the air blowing out is hot. That's good. That means that engine heat's being transferred into the heater core. Okay, I let it idle for a long time, and I watched the temperatures on both the radiator hoses. The temperature gauge in the car went up to medium, stayed there, did not go up. I went in, even ran up the engine to about 2,000 RPM, held it there for a little while. The fan kicked up to a higher speed, what the clutch did on the fan. I think it's working fine. So the level still looks great, and looked underneath it, don't see any leaks. Okay, this engine cover, again, it's got a couple of hooks here that go into some bars back there, so we'll want to just line those up like that, and then it kind of hinges on those, and it should go down, and there's a 2 points here and here where it'll snap in, so you just want to make sure both of those snap like so. And I did go through and clean this. I know it looks out of place now, but since I had it off, I washed it. So while I had this piece off, I also cleaned it with a degreaser because it was pretty dirty too. And if you recall, most of those clips were broken, so I did buy some new clips. This is what I bought. It's actually, instead of trying to find the exact clip, I bought this kit that's got like, 240 different ones in it. So my thinking was, this was so cheap, my thinking was, I'll get the right ones out of here for sure. What I decided to go with, I tested from my kit that really worked the best from that kit are these little, they're actually more like the Christmas tree type clips rather than the plastic rivets. So okay, so what I'm doing is I left this bottom skid plate off the car for about a week, and we drove it around, put a few hundred miles on it, ran it quite a bit, and then before I put that skid plate on there, I wanted to just get back under it and make sure there wasn't any signs of antifreeze leak anywhere, and everything looks good to go, so we'll go ahead and put the skid plate back on it. So if you recall, when we took this off, there's a couple little hooks here on the front, and they've got some slots they got to go in right in there. So you're not going to want to cross thread these, so I always just start them by hand. And this plastic piece goes here in the front, and these are a different bolt size. The bolts for this was 12 millimeters. The bolts for this are 10 millimeter size socket. Okay guys, that's the end of today's videos. If you made it this far, you're amazing, because this is by far the longest video I think I've ever made. It was a big job though, and it took a lot of time to do. So if it helped you out in any way, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, come back and watch some more. You may find something else that's interesting for you too, and I'll see you next time.